The Black Pharaohs of the Kingdom of Kush. The African continent has always been a merge of empires and people fighting to conquer and overthrow each other's sovereignty. Despite the many peoples with origins from Syria, Libya and Turkey constantly fighting the Egyptian Empire in order to conquer its lands, throughout the ancient times, Egypt built one of the greatest empires, which despite several wars and strife, managed to maintain its sovereignty along almost all of the Nile River. Egypt was strong and fierce, but there were a people who sent chills down even the Egyptian solid spines: the Nubians. The Nubians were an African people who lived in the Nubia region, today's Sudan. They lived in the region for a long time, and by 3100 BCE had built many Nubian villages along the Nile River. Given they paid less attention to developing a writing, most of what is known of them is in Egyptian records. The Nubian region, later known as Kush by Egyptians, was a land rich in precious gold and many other raw materials, which consequently attracted the Egyptians to constantly invade the region in search for these raw materials. Although they put up a good resistance, the Nubians were militarily inferior to the Egyptians, hence they were progressively pushed south. The legendary kingdom of Kush and Nubia helped define the political and cultural landscape of northeastern Africa for more than 1,000 years. The kingdom's history is shifting as its capitals were, with each capital demarcating a different time, size and power of the kingdom. Ancient Nubian cultures were sophisticated and cosmopolitan, as the region served as a major trading center for goods from the African interior, Arabian desert and Mediterranean basin. During the period of supremacy, they conquered and ruled Egypt, with kings who came to be known as the Black Pharaohs. Hello explorers, welcome to another informative video presented to you by the Explorer. In this video, we shall dig into the history of the Black Pharaohs of Kush and examine what led to their end. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. The Kingdom of Kush is probably the most famous civilization to emerge from Nubia, and three Kushite kingdoms dominated Nubia for more than 3,000 years, with capitals in Kerma, Napata and Meroitic. The first capital, Kerma, was the most powerful Nubian city-state between about 2450 BCE and 1450 BCE, sometimes considered Kushite and sometimes pre-Kushite. The Kerma kingdom controlled the Nile Valley between the first and fourth cataracts, making its territory as extensive as its powerful neighbor to the north, Egypt. The powerful Egyptian military conquered Kush during the period of time known as the New Kingdom between 1550 BCE to 1070 BCE. From its capital in Napata, Kushite civilization shared many cultural connections with Egypt during this time. Records also indicate marriages between Egyptians and Kushite royal families. Despite these affinities, Egypt and Kush maintained discrete cultural identities. In Egyptian art, Kushites are depicted with darker skin and a cropped hairstyle. Kushites depicted themselves wearing animal skin cloaks, patterned fabrics, and large earrings. Although both cultures valued horses as transportation means, Egyptians preferred to use chariots while Kushites were just as likely to ride the horses themselves. Pharaohs modified their distinctive headdress to reflect their dual kingship of Egypt and Kush. The traditional pharaonic headdress features the uraeus, a stylized depiction of a cobra, and T'Chaka's headdress featuring two cobras, probably symbolizing Egypt and Kush. Napata was clearly influenced by Egyptian culture from its very beginning. Rulers were buried beneath pyramid tombs with Egyptian grave goods, making dating certain graves difficult since a relatively recent grave of a Kushite king might contain items from 200 years before his reign. The third intermediate period in Egypt, although not as chaotic and dark as early Egyptologists have claimed, saw a general decline in the wealth and international prestige of the nation. At the same time, Kush was flourishing, and the first Kushite king, known by name Alara, unified the kingdom and consolidated religious rites centered at Napata. As Egypt declined, the power in Lower Egypt had less and less reach into Upper Egypt. Kashta quietly had his daughter Amenirides appointed God's wife of Amun at Thebes, who took control of Thebes and then simply claimed rule of Upper Egypt. The princes of Lower Egypt at this time were engaged in their own conflicts with each other, as so Kashta arrived at Thebes and declared himself king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Without raising an army or initiating any kind of conflict with the Egyptians, he founded the 25th dynasty of Egypt and was succeeded by his son Pir. There is no record of the reaction of the princes of Lower Egypt to Kashta's declaration, but he strongly objected to Peer's efforts to consolidate Kushite rule in the country. Peer did not negotiate with those he saw as rebel princes and marched his army north, conquering all the cities of Lower Egypt and then returned to Napata. He allowed the conquered kings to retain their thrones, re-establish their authority, and continue as they had previously. They simply had to acknowledge him as their lord. Peer never ruled Egypt from Thebes and does not seem to have given it much thought after his campaign. Peer's brother, Shabaka, succeeded him and continued to reign from Napata. The royalty of Lower Egypt again rebelled. However, the Shabaka defeated them but preserved the Egyptian culture he, his brother, and father had admired. Shabaka's younger brother or nephew, Shebitko, succeeded him and began well until he came into conflict with the Assyrians. Esarhaddon met the Kushite king Tahaka in Baal, defeated him, captured his family and the Kushite and Egyptian nobles, and had them sent back to Nineveh in chains. Nahaka himself managed to escape and fled to Napata. He was succeeded by Tantamani, who continued to antagonize the Assyrians and was defeated by Ashurbanipal, who conquered Egypt in 666 BCE. The Nubian pharaoh Tantamani retreated from Thebes to Napata and later to the southern Kushite capital of Meroe. The Assyrians and Egyptians of the late period attempted to erase Kushite leadership and the 25th dynasty from history by destroying their statutes, steles, and even their names from the historic record. The final period of the kingdom of Kush is sometimes known as the Meroitic period, after its capital at Meroe. The Meroitic period lasted from about 300 BCE until the 4th century BCE. Meroe was ideally positioned as a port city of the Nile, with trade routes to both the Red Sea and the African interior. The most significant artifacts of Meroitic culture are probably its pyramids as a single metropolis at Meroe, which boasts more pyramids than all of Egypt. More than a dozen Kushite kings, queens, and other nobles are entombed with pyramids. The Nubian kingdom of Kush thrived for centuries at Meroe, with Kush's own dynastic leaders, trade systems, adaptations of Egyptian religion, and even its own alphabet and languages. After the 25th dynasty ended with Tantamani, he was replaced by the Assyrians with a puppet king known as Necho I. Necho's son, Psammetichus I, threw off Assyrian rule and founded the 26th dynasty of Egypt. Psammetichus I and his successor, Necho II, ruled well, but Necho II's successor, Psammetichus II, led an expedition against Kush, destroying towns, temples, monuments, stelae, and finally the city of Napata, before he grew bored with the campaign and returned to Egypt. At this time, 590 BCE, the capital of the kingdom of Kush moved further to the city of Meroe for safety. The priest of Amun had long held power over the Kushite monarchy by allotting each king a certain amount of time to reign, and when their god indicated to them that their time was up, the king had to kill himself and another was chosen by the priests. This tradition ended with Akamani I, who had been educated in Greek philosophy and refused to be controlled by the superstitions of the priest. He led a band of men to the temple, had all the priests slaughtered, and ended their power over the monarchy. He then instituted new policies and practices which included abandoning Egyptian culture with an emphasis on Kushites. Akamani I discarded hieroglyphic script in favor of another known as Meroitic, which to date has not been decoded. The fashion of the people of Meroe during his reign shifts away from the Egyptian to distinctly Meroitic, and the gods of the Egyptians become assimilated into Kushite deities such as Apedemak. The tradition of bearing royalty at Napata was also abandoned, and kings would thenceforth be entombed at Meroe. Another interesting innovation of Akamani's first reign was the establishment of female monarchs at Meroe. These queens, known as Candaces or Queen Mother, ruled between 284 BCE and 314 CE without male intervention. One of these queens, Amanirenas, led her people successfully through the Meroitic War between Kush and Rome and was able to negotiate favorable terms in the peace treaty from Augustus Caesar. Even though Kush prospered for centuries, Queen Cleopatra's death in 30 BC brought change. Egypt became a province of the nascent Roman Empire, straining the fragile truce that the Kushites had brokered with Rome. Dark revolts in Upper Egypt led to the Roman incursions into Kushite territory, threatening their lucrative gold mines. Meroite forces attacked Roman troops in Aswan, the most southerly frontier of the Roman world, led by the fearsome Queen Amenirenas of Meroe. The Queen Amenirenas, described as a masculine woman, had lost an eye in battle. She led an army which conquered the Roman army, bringing home the head of its commander, after which the Meroitic civilization was largely left in peace. The kingdom of Kush continued on with Meroe as its capital until an invasion by the Axumites in 330 CE, which destroyed the city and toppled the kingdom. Overuse of the land, however, had already depleted the resources of Kush, and the cities would most likely have been abandoned even without the Axumite invasion. Following this event, Meroitic and the dwindling kingdom of Kush survived another 20 years before its end in 350 CE. Rising high in the sky in the modern-day nation of Sudan is a plethora of pyramids which marks the site of the ancient city Meroitic, a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a place where the reign of the Black Pharaohs came to an end. There you have it, explorers. Those were the Black Pharaohs of Kush. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and do not forget to subscribe and share with your friends.